I'm standing in Soldiers Grove, Wisconsin, looking at a wall that went up before anyone alive today was born. I press my hand flat against it. The logs are cold from the morning air. Tight in the mortar. Not a crack, not a gap, not a single sign that 140 winters have passed through it. Just wood, mortar, and sawdust. Yeah, that's the entire wall. The heating bill for the house behind this wall last winter, $400 for the whole winter. Their neighbor, same road, same size house, $1,800. Look, I spent years paying bills like that neighbor's without once questioning why. I just assumed that was what heating a home costs. But boy was I wrong. And then I pulled on a thread that led me into Amish construction records from Wisconsin and Minnesota communities that have been building this way for over 200 years. And I realized that what I thought I knew about how a home stays warm was built almost entirely on what someone else needed me to believe. The U.S. Department of Energy has published thermal performance data on this. A private organization funded by $40 billion in building materials money has made sure this system never appears in the code that decides what you're allowed to build. But lucky for you, I'm about to show you the exact system they use. Stay with me through the end of this, because the last thing I cover is the piece most people miss entirely. And it is the piece that makes everything else actually matter for the home you are living in right now. See, the technique is called cordwood masonry. Some call it stack wall. The Amish call it what it simply is, short logs, stacked on their ends in mortar, the way their great-grandparents built, because nothing they tried since worked better. When I first saw one of these walls up close, I did not immediately understand what I was looking at. From the outside, you see the cross sections of the logs running the full depth of the wall, tight and flush with the mortar on both faces. And between the outer and inner mortar strips, the cavity around each log is packed with sawdust or wood shavings. No exotic materials, no engineered components, just wood, mortar, and sawdust. Yeah, that's the entire wall. I remember thinking, this cannot possibly outperform what we build today. I was wrong. A standard modern wall, 2x6 framing, fiberglass insulation. The current code baseline across most of the United States achieves roughly R19 to R21. That is its insulation rating, and that is the full extent of what it does. The fiberglass slows heat transfer, but stores nothing. The moment your furnace stops running, that wall stops contributing. It holds the line while the furnace is on and does nothing the moment it switches off. It is a barrier, not a battery. A 1/6-inch cordwood wall delivers R22 to R25 already ahead of the code baseline, but the rating alone does not capture what the wall actually does, and this is the part that stopped me when I first understood it. The logs absorb heat during the warmer part of the day and then release it slowly after temperatures drop at night. The same wall that is blocking cold from outside is simultaneously storing heat from inside and feeding it back into the room for hours after the heating system has shut off. Insulation and thermal battery. One wall doing both jobs at the same time. The Oak Ridge National Laboratory, the U.S. Department of Energy's primary building science research facility, confirmed this dual performance. No standard insulated stud wall in any building code replicates it. Now here is the detail I almost missed, and it is the one that separates a cordwood wall standing for 140 years from one failing in 20. It is not the logs, it is the mortar. The Amish do not use Portland cement. They use lime, mortar lime, sand, sawdust, and ash. When I first read this, I assumed it was simply tradition, the way old builders sometimes hold on to methods out of habit rather than reason. It is not tradition, it is the result of generations of watching what actually happens when you get it wrong. Portland cement is rigid and brittle, wood is neither. It expands when it absorbs moisture, contracts when it dries out, and shifts with every season across its entire life. A Portland cement joint around a log end will crack. I have seen it myself in cordwood structures from the 1970s where builders substituted Portland cement thinking it would perform better. The cracks are there. Moisture entered, rot followed. The wall failed from the inside out, invisibly and slowly until the damage was already done. Lime mortar moves with the wood. It stays tight across decades of seasonal movement. It is also slightly alkaline, which creates a chemical environment that actively resists fungal growth and insect activity in the surrounding log ends. The Amish did not learn this from a textbook. They learned it from watching lime mortar walls built in the 1880s still standing solid while the Portland cement experiments were already showing their failures. That is a more reliable data set than any laboratory study. 2 centuries of direct observation passed from builder to builder, generation to generation. Rob Roy spent 35 years at Earthwood Building School in West Chazy, New York, documenting exactly this. Thermal performance data, structural analysis, long-term case studies across multiple climates. His conclusion matched what Amish builders in Marathon County, Wisconsin, already knew from 200 years of building. With lime mortar, the right wood species, and a wall thickness of at least 12 inches, you are building something that outlasts the people who built it. Cedar, pine, and tamarack are optimal, low shrinkage, natural rot resistance, readily available across the upper Midwest, where these communities have always been. The family in Soldiers Grove did not install a special heating system. They did not retrofit anything or upgrade anything. Their walls simply do not lose heat the way every code-compliant house on their road does. I stood inside that house on a February morning when the temperature outside was 4 degrees. The interior was 67. The masonry heater in the main room had been lit the evening before and was barely warm to the touch. The walls were doing the work. That $400 bill is not a technology story, it is a materials story. And the moment I understood that, I started asking a question I could not let go of. Why does every house on that road, on every road in Wisconsin, get built with fiberglass and 2x6 framing? Part of the answer is speed. A conventional framed wall goes up in hours. A cordwood wall takes days. Developers build houses to sell, not to last. The entire business model of residential construction in America is built on volume, get the house up, get it sold, move to the next lot. A wall system requiring seasoned wood, careful mortar mixing, and methodical hand-laying does not fit that model and never will. But that speed has a cost that lands entirely on the person who ends up living in the house. That $30,000 to $50,000 in conventional wall materials will need re-insulating, recaulking, and residing within 20 to 30 years. The fiberglass compresses over time and loses rated R value silently while the heating bills climb. The family paying $1,800 a winter is not paying for warmth. They are paying for a wall someone else built fast. But speed is only part of the answer. The other part is harder to accept. That wall behind me, 140 years of documented performance, DOE thermal data, still standing and still working in Wisconsin winters, does not exist in the International Residential Code. The document that determines what 330 million Americans are legally allowed to build in their own homes has never once evaluated cordwood masonry. Not a single assessment or conditional approval or rejection, nothing. Rob Roy submitted evidence for over 3 decades. The organization responsible never responded. Not even once. That organization is called the International Code Council. It is not a government agency, but a private body funded in significant part by the Portland Cement Association, Owens Corning, and the American Chemistry Council, the corporations that manufacture the exact materials a cordwood wall does not use. Their combined revenue exceeds $40 billion annually. Now, let me tell you what that actually means in practical terms. It means that a wall with 140 years of Wisconsin winters behind it, a wall the Department of Energy has studied, a wall that costs between $500 and $2,000 to build. If you have trees on your land, that wall is invisible to every building inspector in every jurisdiction that adopted the IRC, not because it failed any performance standard, because it was never given one to pass, and the organization with the power to give it one is funded by the people who would lose the most if it became mainstream. The wall is not banned, it is erased. And there is a difference. A band wall generates attention, people ask why, arguments get made, evidence gets reviewed. An erased wall simply does not exist in the document that matters, and most people never think to ask about something they have never heard of. I did not ask for years. I paid heating bills I did not need to pay, in houses built with materials I did not need to buy, and I assumed that was just how it worked. It is not how it works. And the rest of this video is going to show you exactly what does the knowledge survived, because the people kept building anyway. I drove into Marathon County on a Tuesday morning, sometimes in January. I had an address for an Amish property where a cordwood barn has been standing since 1883. When I pulled up, the owner, a man in his 60s who had been born in that county and had never lived anywhere else, was already outside. He walked me around the perimeter of the barn without a coat on, not making a point, just not cold. He pressed his palm flat against the exterior wall, the way you touch something familiar, and told me his grandfather had laid those logs. Nobody had touched the mortar since. I ran my fingers along the joints, tight, not patched, not refilled, not repaired. Original lime mortar from 1883, still seated against log ends that had expanded and contracted through 140 Wisconsin winters without opening a single crack wide enough to pass a fingernail through. I stood there longer than I probably needed to. I have paid contractors to recaulk windows that failed in 3 years. I have watched deck boards gray and split within a decade. I kept pressing my fingers into those joints looking for something that was not there. A conventional house does not just cost money to build, it costs money continuously in ways designed to feel like normal life rather than a recurring invoice. Caulk fails and you recaulk, siding cracks and you replace sections, insulation settles over years, losing R value silently while heating bills increase gradually enough that you adjust your budget instead of questioning the wall. The fiberglass installed in a house today will not perform at its rated value in 15 years. That is not a manufacturing defect. That is the material behaving exactly as its producers understand it will behave. The repeat purchase is built into the product from the beginning. Standing at that 1883 barn wall, I thought about every house I had lived in, every heating bill, every contractor visit I had treated as routine. None of it was inevitable. It was a choice made upstream of me before I ever moved in by people who had every financial reason to make it. Let me walk you through what building this wall actually looks like in practice, because this is where most people who find cordwood masonry for the first time get lost in the concept and never reach the practical reality of doing it themselves. The foundation is conventional. A standard rubble trench or poured footing works fine. What matters is that the wall base sits above grade, above ground level, to prevent moisture wicking up into the log ends from below. The Amish use a stone or concrete stem wall of 12 to 18 inches before the cordwood begins. When I asked the Marathon County builder why the base of the 1883 barn was stone rather than cordwood all the way down, his answer was immediate. Because the ones built without it did not last. 2 centuries of observation distilled into one construction detail, delivered without hesitation. The mortar mix is where most first-time builders make their only serious mistake. The traditional Amish mix is roughly 3 parts sand, 1 part lime putty, and 1 part soaked sawdust by volume. Some builders in wetter climates add a small amount of Portland cement, no more than 10% of the total mix for faster curing. Rob Roy's research found this acceptable as long as Portland cement remains a minor additive. The moment it becomes the dominant binder, the flexibility that makes the system work across decades disappears with it. I made this mistake myself on the first small structure I attempted. I was impatient with the curing time and pushed the Portland cement ratio higher than it should have been. Within 2 winters, hairline cracks had opened at 3 log ends on the north face. I repointed them with proper lime mortar and they have not moved since. But I understood something from my own wall that I had not fully absorbed from reading about it. The lime mortar is not a compromise or a concession to tradition. It is the reason the wall works at all across a lifetime. The sawdust packed between the mortar strips is not filler either. It adds insulation value to the mortar beds themselves and acts as a buffer that further accommodates wood movement at the log-mortar interface. Amish builders sourced it from their own sawmill operations. Today it is available from any lumber mill, often free for the asking. The entire insulation component of this wall, the material doing the thermal work inside the cavity, costs almost nothing. Log preparation matters more than most guides acknowledge. The wood needs to be fully seasoned, at least 1 year, and preferably 2. Green wood shrinks as it dries, and shrinkage after the wall is built opens gaps at the mortar joint. Those gaps are not structural failures, but they are thermal leaks. And in a Wisconsin winter, a thermal leak is a direct transfer of heat from inside your home to outside air. The Amish understood this the way they understood everything about this system, by watching what happened when someone cut a corner and making sure the next generation never repeated it. The laying process itself is methodical but not complicated. You place the outer mortar strip first, roughly 3 inches wide along the exterior edge, then the inner strip along the interior edge. The cavity between those two strips, 6 to 10 inches depending on wall thickness, is your insulation zone, packed with dry sawdust or cellulose as you go, course by course. Each log is pressed firmly into both mortar beds with a slight twisting motion to ensure full contact. One person with basic masonry experience can build this wall. 2 people move faster. The Amish build them communally. The knowledge passed directly from the person who has done it to the person doing it now, standing at the same wall, laying the same mortar in real time. The wood species decision affects both the thermal performance and the long-term integrity of the wall more than most first-time builders expect. Eastern white cedar is the standard the Amish return to consistently. Lowest shrinkage rate of any common North American species, natural oils that resist rot and insect activity, and thermal mass properties that hold up through the freeze-thaw cycles of Great Lakes winters. When I asked the Marathon County builder why his grandfather had chosen cedar for the 1,883 barn, he looked at me the way someone looks when they have been asked why water is wet. "Because it lasts," he said. That was the complete answer. White pine is a reliable second choice, widely available, easy to work, acceptable shrinkage when properly seasoned. Tamarack, also called Eastern Larch, is denser and carries higher thermal mass. It takes longer to season, but the performance in cold climates is worth the wait. What you want to avoid is any species with high tannin content, with oak being the primary example. Tannins react with lime mortar over time, staining the wall face and in high concentrations interfering with the mortar cure. The Amish solved this by simply never using oak for cordwood. No rule written down anywhere. Just accumulated knowledge of what works and what does not, passed forward. The interior log faces are left natural, no paint, no sealant. My first instinct when I saw this was the same instinct shaped by decades of conventional construction thinking. Exposed wood needs protection. It does not in this context. The lime mortar environment manages moisture on its own. Sealing the log ends traps moisture rather than allowing the wall to breathe, which accelerates the exact decay you are trying to prevent. Modern construction is obsessed with sealing surfaces. Cordwood construction manages moisture movement rather than attempting to stop it. That shift in thinking, once it settled in, changed how I look at walls entirely. There is something Rob Roy documented that I had not seen clearly explained anywhere before I found it in his published research. He called it thermal lag, and it is the detail that explains the $400 heating bill more precisely than anything else I have covered. A 1/6-inch cordwood wall does not just insulate, it delays. Heat absorbed by the wall during the warmest part of the afternoon takes 8 to 10 hours to fully conduct through to the interior surface. I sat in the Soldiers Grove house at 11 at night on a February evening with the outdoor temperature at 6 degrees. The masonry heater had not been running for hours. The interior walls were warm to the touch. The room was 65 degrees and nothing mechanical was operating. The wall was still working. Still releasing heat it had absorbed that afternoon, conducting it slowly inward through 16 inches of wood and lime, delivering it into the living space hours after the sun had gone down and the temperature outside had dropped to single digits. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory documented this same behavior in their Trombe wall research at their Colorado facility. A south-facing masonry wall-absorbing afternoon sun reached peak interior heat release around 10 p.m. The cordwood wall operates on the same physical principle without any of the engineered components a Trombe wall requires. No glazing system, no selective surface coating, no mechanical assembly of any kind. The mass is the mechanism. And once I understood that, once I felt it, sitting in that room at 11 p.m. with a cold heater and warm walls, the $400 bill stopped being a surprising number and started being the only logical outcome. Now I want to ask you something specific before we go further, and I want you to answer it in the comments because your answer genuinely shapes what I cover next. If the legal path to build this wall exists in your state, and I am going to show you in a moment that it does, in 44 states, what is the single thing that would still stop you from building it? The permit process, the wood sourcing, the construction time, the seasoning, weight. Leave your specific answer below. Not a general reaction, your actual barrier. The next video in this series goes directly at the most common answer this community gives me, and if your barrier is the one I cover, you will want to be there for it. Every person I have found who lives in a cordwood home describes the same thing when I ask them about the heat. They do not talk about temperature first, they talk about quality. No drafts, no blasts of forced air cycling on and off through the night, no cold wall surfaces near exterior windows. The room is simply warm, evenly, quietly warm in a way that is difficult to describe until you have sat inside it. The walls themselves are warm to the touch on the interior surface, radiating heat the way a fireplace surround radiates heat, not pushing air but warming everything within range of its surface directly. I noticed it the first night I stayed in the Soldiers Grove house. I woke up at 3 a.m. and lay still for a moment, trying to identify what was different. The room was 64 degrees. In any house I had lived in before, 64 degrees at 3 a.m. in a Wisconsin February would have felt cold enough to pull another blanket. It did not feel cold. The walls were doing something a furnace does not do, warming the room from every surface simultaneously rather than pushing heated air from a single vent. Your body responds to radiant heat differently than to convection. You feel warmer at a lower air temperature, which means the thermostat runs lower, the heating system runs less, and the bill at the end of winter reflects a home that was genuinely warm rather than a home that was constantly chasing warmth with a furnace. The brand survey of Trombe wall users in New Zealand captured this in the words of the people living inside those walls. Occupants described the heat as not stuffy like artificial heating, a subtle, radiative warmth they found more comfortable than any other heating system they had used. A cordwood wall delivers that same quality without a Trombe wall assembly, without glazing, without any engineered component at all. Just wood and lime and 200 years of the Amish understanding something the building industry spent $40 billion making sure you never learned. And now we get to the part that actually changes something for you personally, because everything I have covered so far, the wall, the mortar, the thermal lag, the ICC is history and physics and documentation, interesting, maybe even infuriating, but none of it matters if you cannot build it. So let me tell you exactly what the legal path looks like, because I spent months assuming there was not one before I found it sitting in plain sight. Every state in America that has adopted the International Residential Code also carries something called the owner builder exemption. It does not appear in any mainstream home building guide. Your contractor will not mention it. The building department will not volunteer it at the counter, but it exists, written into the statutes of 44 states. And what it says is straightforward. If you are building your own primary residence with your own hands on land you own, you are exempt from the contractor licensing requirements that govern professional construction. I remember the afternoon I found this. I had been going in circles for weeks assuming that a wall system absent from the IRC was a wall system. I had no legal path to build. I was sitting at a table in the Marathon County Library with a stack of printed state statutes in front of me, and I kept reading the same provision in different forms across state after state. The exemption was not hidden, it was just never discussed in any context I had encountered before. I had been paying contractors to build things. I was legally entitled to build myself with materials I was legally entitled to choose, and nobody had ever thought to tell me I have to be precise about what the exemption covers and what it does not, because this is where people either move forward or talk themselves out of it. It does not exempt you from building permits where they are required. It does not override local zoning. What it removes is the barrier that stops most people before they even start, the assumption that you need a licensed professional to build something the code has never evaluated. You do not. Rob Roy built his first cordwood structure in 1975 and permitted it himself under the owner-builder exemption in upstate New York. His home at Earthwood in West Chazy has been standing ever since. He spent the next 35 years helping others do the same across dozens of states, and the documentation he produced exists precisely because he understood that the legal path required evidence a building department could review even in the absence of an IRC specification. That evidence is what you bring to the permit office. You bring three things: the DOE thermal data from Oak Ridge National Laboratory, the 140-year case studies from Marathon County, Rob Roy's published research. The building official reviewing your application already has authority under Section R 104(11) of the IRC itself to approve alternative materials and methods that meet equivalent performance. That provision exists inside the very document that ignores cordwood masonry. Most building officials have never been asked to use it for a cordwood wall, but when you walk in with the data, the case studies, and a clear construction plan, you are not asking for a favor. You are making a documented technical submission to someone who already has the power to say yes. A builder in Vermont has permitted and built cordwood structures in 3 different counties using exactly this approach. 0 rejections across all 3. His documentation package, DOE data, case studies, construction specifications is now shared freely in the cordwood building community online. I have used it myself. The difference between his outcome and the outcome most people expect is not luck or connections or a sympathetic building official. It is preparation, showing up with the evidence rather than showing up and hoping. Now, let me give you the numbers in full, because this is where the conversation stops being philosophical and becomes something you can feel in your own bank account. If you have timber on your land, cedar, pine, or tamarack, your primary material cost is the cutting and the seasoning. A chainsaw, a week of bucking logs to length, 1 to 2 years of stacking and drying. The wood costs nothing because it is already yours. The lime, sand, and sawdust for the mortar on a standard 1,500 square foot home runs between $500 and $1,500 depending on region and current material prices. Total wall material costs somewhere between $500 and $2,000. The same wall area in conventional 2x6 framing with insulation, sheathing, vapor barrier, and siding runs $30,000 to $50,000 in materials alone before a single hour of labor is charged. I priced this out myself for a 1,400 square foot structure I was planning 3 years ago. The conventional wall estimate from a regional supplier came in at $34,000 in materials. The cordwood alternative with timber from my own land came in at $800. I sat with those two numbers for a long time, not because the math was complicated, but because of what it implied about every house I had ever lived in and every bill I had ever paid. And that gap compounds. The $34,000 wall needs recaulking, re-siding, and insulation replacement as it compresses and loses rated R value. Every 20 to 30 years, it comes back for more money. The cordwood wall built in Marathon County in 1885 has not asked for anything since the mortar cured. The family paying $400 a winter is not paying $400 because they found a clever workaround. They are paying $400 because the upfront cost of their wall was $800, and it has never asked for another dollar since. Before I get to the final piece of this, I want to point you somewhere. Everything I have covered across this video, the construction specifics, the mortar ratios, the wood species, the permit strategy, the alternative compliance process under Section R 104(11) is documented in full in one place. It is called the Amish Home System. It covers cordwood masonry in complete practical detail alongside 4 other Amish building methods that operate on the same principle: permanent performance over planned obsolescence. Everything inside is practical, documented, and designed for someone who owns land and wants to build something that genuinely lasts. Not a weekend project guide, a serious construction resource built from 200 years of evidence. The link is in the description. There is one final aspect of this wall I have not covered yet, and it is the one that stopped me completely the first time I encountered it, because it reframes everything else in a way I was not expecting. The wall breathes, not as a metaphor, physically. A cordwood wall with lime mortar and unsealed log ends manages moisture through a process called vapor diffusion. Moisture moves through the wall in response to humidity differentials between inside and outside, absorbed slowly by the wood and mortar mass and released slowly as conditions change. The wall never reaches the moisture concentration that causes rot or mold because it is never sealed tightly enough to trap moisture in the first place. Modern construction does the exact opposite. It attempts to create a vapor barrier, a sealed membrane that stops all moisture movement. In theory, this protects the insulation and framing inside the wall cavity. In practice, any penetration of that barrier, a nail, a wire, a settling crack, becomes a moisture trap. Humid interior air finds the gap, enters the cavity, meets the cold exterior sheathing, and condenses. Mold begins, insulation saturates, R value drops, and the homeowner has no idea until the wall is opened and the damage is already done. I had this happen in a house I owned in 2011. A slow leak around an electrical box on an exterior wall. By the time I found it, the insulation in a 4-foot section of wall cavity had been saturated for long enough that the framing behind it had begun to blacken. The repair cost me $2,200. The building science researchers at Oak Ridge National Laboratory have documented moisture-related degradation as one of the primary causes of below-rated thermal performance in conventional insulated walls across the country. The barrier fails, and the wall silently becomes less effective year after year while the heating bills climb and nobody connects the two. The cordwood wall has no barrier to fail. The lime mortar environment keeps the wall slightly alkaline, hostile to mold and fungal growth at the chemistry level. The log mass buffers moisture movement without ever concentrating it. The wall performs in year 30 the way it performed in year 1. I pressed my hand against the interior face of the 1,883 Marathon County barn wall on that January morning, and it was dry. Not treated, not sealed, not maintained, just dry. Because the wall was managing moisture the way lime and wood have always managed it, slowly, continuously, without intervention. The people who've been building cordwood walls outside the Amish community for the past 50 years are not survivalists or idealists. They are people who ran the numbers and made a rational decision. A retired teacher in northern Minnesota built her cordwood home in 1987 under the owner-builder exemption. She is still there, still tight. Her heating bill last winter, in a climate nearly identical to Soldiers Grove, was $380. A family in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan built in 1994. Their children grew up in that house. The children are adults now. The wall has never been touched. These are not outliers. They are the people who found the legal path, did the work, and have been sitting inside walls that paid them back every winter since the mortar cured. The Amish family in Soldiers Grove is not doing anything extraordinary. They are not making sacrifices or living without the things the rest of us consider normal. They are simply warm. Their house is quiet and even-tempered through winters that send everyone else's heating bills past $1,500. Their walls cost a fraction of what their neighbors paid and have never asked for another dollar since the day they went up. Those walls will still be standing, still performing, still doing exactly what lime and wood and 2 centuries of accumulated knowledge built them to do long after every fiberglass insulated Portland cement framed house on their road has been re-sided, re-insulated, and resold. I need you to understand that this wall is not an isolated idea, but part of a complete system the Amish have applied to everything they own, including their tools. I already covered their 200 200-year metal preservation system in a video on this channel, and the suppression story behind it is just as deliberate. 0 replacements in 200 years. Watch it next.